Have you decided that you're ready to add chickens to your homestead, but you're confused by all the conflicting information that you see online? Do you wonder, how will you ever learn it all before you pick up your first chicks? Today, I will encourage you to just get started. An 80-year-old farmer friend said to me recently, "If you think you know everything, you probably know nothing." Learning new things about chickens and other livestock only ends when you quit or you die. So if you don't plan to give up on your dream of raising chickens, then stay with me for the next few minutes while I share with you the basic steps required for you to have confidence enough to raise some little cluckers for yourself. Hello, my name is Georgia. I help beginner farmers and homesteaders to build a solid foundation with livestock, naturally and intuitively, from the ground up. I've heard a lot of strange advice handed out in recent months to beginners asking what they need to do for new chicks. When beginners ask random people online for advice, the answers they get might be right or they might be wrong, but the question by itself is out of context for total chick care and comfort. Doing one or two random things but not doing the other necessary things, you may end up with trouble for your chicks. I want to try and make this as simple as possible. In a recent video I did, Raising Chickens from the Ground Up, I walk you through the basics of what you need to consider before buying chicks. Today I will explain what has continued to work for me during the 40 years that I've been working with chickens and let you in on a few mistakes that I have made so that hopefully you could avoid them. On a baby chick checklist, what you will need: chicks, a brooder, bedding, a heat source, feed, lighting, and observation skills. If you are just starting out with chickens, keep it simple. The less trouble you cause yourself, the more likely you will be to keep at it over time. I would recommend just getting one age group. Most people start out with day-olds. Don't mix birds from different farms to help eliminate possible disease or pest transfer. If you plan to start laying hens and meet chicks at the same time, that's okay. Just know that their space requirements change as they get bigger. The meat birds will be big and bulky, while the laying hens will be small, agile, and fly. If kept in a closed coop or chicken tractor, know that the laying hen chicks may start to pick on and peck holes in your chicken dinner. The place you rear chicks is called a brooder or brooder box. It needs to be a clean, predator-proof container, free from drafts. It needs to be large enough to house your chicks from day old until they are feathered around 3.5 to 4 weeks of age or longer. I've built a few different boxes over the years, usually out of plywood. When we moved to this location, there was a small chicken coop that was empty, so we raised the chicks in there. But by the second year, we realized that wouldn't work as our now adult birds were living in it. I had sold my brooder boxes when we moved to this farm, as they were large, 4 by 8 feet, 2 feet tall, with a plywood floor, large grates on the top that was hinged, and a door on each end. The middle section held the heat lamps. I used to raise the maximum limit that we were allowed to here, which is 300 meat birds. The legal limit for laying hens is 99, but I've never felt the need to have quite that many. My son Clayton took over the laying hens a few years back, and he raises eggs to sell to our friends. As I've mentioned in previous videos, my son and I were in a head-on collision 5 years ago, and I broke my neck in 2 places and suffered a brain injury. So I've had to tone down the sizes and numbers of birds and animals in my care. Since I wasn't planning to raise as many as I used to, I thought I didn't need the big brooder box. Our large freezer had quit just after we moved here, and I'd tried using it for feed storage, but it hadn't worked out so well for us. It seemed to be just about the perfect size for the new brooder box. In the past, I'd always had to cover up the top of the brooder with many blankets, the great big brooder, to keep the heat in from the 2 heat lamps. This one only required 1 heat lamp. I did what I always did. I turned the heat lamp on high, covered the top with blankets, and went on my merry way. Luckily, I check on new chicks quite often, and I narrowly avoided a fried chicken incident. Putting the chicks in an insulated box is a great way to reduce drafts, but it's a bit much if you close off the top. Anyway, I could use the brain injury as an excuse, but if I could do that with close to 40 years experience, if illness, predator, or accident happens to one or even all of your chicks, chalk it up to a learning experience. Don't give up. Do better next time. I remember an instance several years ago where for some reason, I don't remember why, I was trying to keep 2 groups of little birds separate in the same large brooder. I had a brilliant idea of putting an 8-inch board on its side between the two groups. I propped it up. It seemed sturdy enough at the time to keep a few chicks apart. I was in a bit of a hurry, and I didn't take a moment to fasten it securely. I was only thinking that little chicks were not going to fly over it. I came back the next morning, and the board had fallen over, onto about a dozen chicks. I picked up the board, and by some stroke of luck, some had managed to dig a hole in the bedding and were still alive, but sadly 6 of them did die. It was terrible, but these and other things happen if you're cutting corners and not paying attention. I want to help you get a solid foundation so that you can avoid making fatal mistakes. As for bedding, I have always used the softwood chip shavings. They are the large flake shavings commonly available at your local feed store. Chopped straw or peat moss would be the other options, but it's most common to use the shavings. Once I ran out of shavings, and I had several hundred birds in the brooder. I had put in regular long straw that I use for other livestock. It seemed like it should work, but it didn't. They just pooped on the top of it and became wet and dirty in a hurry. I would definitely not start chicks on sawdust, as the chicks could confuse the bedding with food. With the shavings, it's simple. When the bedding is wet or when it gets dirty, just sprinkle some new shavings over top. If you have a lot of birds or a small space, you might have to clean it out from time to time, but otherwise, a deep pack is usually a good thing. You can add a bedding agent like Stalsan F. That's what I use. It helps to keep the smell down and keep the chicks a bit drier and cleaner, which is always good for health. I always figure that if you put your nose down at the same height where the bird or the animal's nose is, then you will know what they have to smell. No one wants to be gassed by fumes. So that's one way you can tell. I recently saw a post of a woman wondering what bedding to use. As well as many other people, I gave the suggestion of shavings. But one person told them to buy puppy pea pads to put under the chicks. I guess since they were having them in the house, they thought that this was the best idea. I've seen several posts from this same person now. Actually, I looked back in history in that same homesteading group to see the progression. Yes, she chose the puppy pea pads, which I have never heard of using with chicks before, but it caused one issue after the next for her. I feel bad for the woman, but now I personally like to do things as naturally as possible, and buying non-recyclable plastic to put under a chick for it to poop on doesn't seem logical to me. Also, as the name of the product suggests, it's a pea pad. A chicken poops. My first thought was that the poop would be left sitting on top of the pad for the chicks to wander around on, get dirty, and spread shit everywhere. I've heard of folks putting down newspapers or paper towels for a few days on top of the bedding so that the chick doesn't confuse the bedding with the food. But I have never done that, and I have never had a problem. So also, if you don't spread out enough food on the paper, then it becomes slippery and they may injure their legs, and then you have even more problems. The next post I saw by the person, they're worried that the poop, wondering if the poop looks right, and showed a picture of the poop sitting on the pad. Wondered if they needed to bath the chicken, 2-day-old chicks, that they've been feeding medicated feed to. Someone replies to tell them to wash and blow dry their chicks, and they listen. I have to say that I have never, not once, washed and blow dried a chicken. Unless they were to fall into an icy pond or be covered in motor oil, maybe in that instance it would be warranted. Most people don't have the time or inclination to be fluffing their chicks' butts. But when I looked back at the other posts she made, using the puppy pea pads, she was changing the pads 2 to 3 times per day. The manure was caked on the chicks' feet, even after she still had to wash their feet and legs every day because the poop was all over everything. The chicks were 2 weeks old, and then she ran out of expensive puppy pea pads and decided to put wood stove pellets in her brooder. Then she posted asking if the chicks would die overnight because she did this. People responded saying pellets look like feed and it wouldn't be a good idea. That someone said she could add water to them to get them to the sawdust-like quality. So consider now the ladies adding water to the chicks' bedding, which can now make for a bacteria-laden environment. Next post, she's wondering if the chickens are now going to eat the wet sawdust. People keep telling her to use shavings, and she said she thought it would be too messy for her living room, or too dusty. Well, after all the poop mess that she had to deal with, it's hard to believe that she didn't just switch it up after a few days. But she and many other beginners apparently aren't armed with the knowledge that if it isn't working, it isn't right, and something needs to change. If done right, chicks are relatively easy to raise. Chicks should be clean, free from manure or pests, protected from drafts and predators, with a constant source of fresh water and feed. If you find that you're having to intervene all the time, perform unnatural acts like bathing your chicks, consider that you have missed something. Continuing to do the same thing over and over if it's not working is very stressful on both the bird and the caretaker, and can even take a toll on your family. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it. Remember to press the subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next episode in this series, where I'll walk you through what you'll need to know about heat sources, water, feed, and lighting, helping you to build a solid foundation towards your dream of raising some little cluckers for yourself. Now you just need to decide if you're only interested or if you are actually committed to having chicks. Take the first step or the next step to fulfilling your dream of raising chickens. Let me know in the comments where you're at in your chicken raising journey. Check out the link in my website in the description where you can get more information about my coaching services. Also, you can get a copy of my book through the website as well. Thank you kindly for watching.